Otherwise, I will totally forget. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to talk to you today about using social media for career development. My name is Jen Allmiller. I am the Director of Career and Professional Development for the University of Maryland School of Medicine. I work in the graduate program in life sciences and the Office of Postdoctoral Scholars. So I work largely with biomedical and population health scientists. And so I've been working with that population for about 20 years. But I myself am actually in health professions education. So kind of coming at this from a couple of different perspectives. But I think thinking about social media and how you can harness this to create your brand is really important. And what are some really good things to do? And what are some things to kind of avoid when we're on social media? And I think another, I hope some of you were able, I see some of the people in the chat have put, they've done LinkedIn. If you'd like to add any social media platforms you've been using, go ahead, even if it's not for career development. And hopefully I can encourage you to start thinking about all of these things for your own career professional development. And I hope that those of you who are really interested in LinkedIn, I'll be touching on that today too, but I know my colleague gave a really great talk on LinkedIn that was also recorded earlier today. So I highly recommend checking that out if you weren't there as well. So what we're going to be talking about today is kind of thinking about defining your brand. And then why is that important on social media? Having this super, jargony kind of sales thing going on in my social media. And then thinking about what is your brand. And I'm not thinking you're going to be able to tell me right now what your brand is, but really being mindful about what that is and starting to develop that on your social media platforms. Then we're going to talk about where you can go online to promote your brand. I'm seeing a lot of people are using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, LinkedIn. Those are really great places to be. Some people haven't really dipped their toes yet into social media. So hopefully I can convince you that maybe it's a good ththing to do. And then talking about some best practices on social media. I'm definitely going to leave some time for questions at the end. It doesn't work really well within the presentation. So please save your questions for the end and I'll make sure that we have some time to answer those. Okay. So when we're thinking about brands, there's a lot of things we think about. You can look at a logo and you already have like kind of some perspectives of what a brand is. So let's take Starbucks, for example. That's this little happy green mermaid here. When you think of the Starbucks brand, what do you think of? You can either raise your hand or put some things in the chat. Like, what do you think when you hear the word Starbucks? Expensive coffee all over the world and in every city. I'm getting 2 expensive coffees, right? Anything else? Okay. Well, so we've got expensive coffee. So when people think of Starbucks, they're thinking maybe expensive coffee or that it's really accessible. Like you can travel anywhere and find a Starbucks. Heck, they even have it in Disney World now because they realized people demanded their Starbucks, right? So there's a lot of things that come along with the brand. Expensive maybe isn't something that you would want to have as part of your brand because maybe people wouldn't even try it because it's expensive. So thinking about these brands, and the truth is that each of us has a brand that we carry with us, whether we're aware of it or not. So this is something, there's a really, really great book called Marketing for Scientists by Mark Kuchner. And he was an astrophysicist that decided that he wanted to break into the country music scene. I know, who would guess that that would be something you would do? But what was really, really cool about what he did is he went in and, his managers were talking to him about, okay, so you're a country singer. You got to think about your brand. What are you telling people about what your music is like and all of these things? And then he started realizing this was something that was actually happening when he was going to scientific conferences. People had brands depending on how they dressed, depending on how they interacted with people, depending on their research areas, all of those things. So he said a brand is a set of all expectations that consumers have about a company or a product. So when you're thinking about your brand, it's two things really. It's how you see yourself and how others see you. So you actually have some control of this brand. And so the intersection of these two things are your personal brand. And so social media is where you can kind of start to insert how you see yourself or what you want your brand to be. So it's a really powerful tool. Here, just diving a little deeper into brand, what does it mean for you? And your personal brand is the way your values and talents are deliberately expressed. So these are, either you're doing it deliberately or not deliberately, but you can do it deliberately through your profession, through your skill set, your online presence, your communication style, even your clothing. If you go to a conference, you can kind of scan the room sometimes and see who is, looking to go on the job market, who is pretty comfortable where they are. But what your personal brand represents what you stand for in a way that defines you and sets you apart. So we're going to really be focusing, you could do whole talks on communication styles, even dressing for certain events. But today we're going to be talking about your online presence and the power that you have there. So how this is important for social media is if you've established your credibility, people can start seeing the value of your offerings. So if you're somebody who posts or retweets or whatever, people may start to come to your site. And there's probably, if you're on social media, maybe some people you follow because you trust the information you're getting. Social media allows you to reach more people outside the sphere of your influence. And that's a really important concept, especially when we're talking about career development, because what you want to be is a known commodity. And again, I'm not trying to make you all commodities, but if you're applying for a position or you're applying for a grant or you're putting in a paper, people are already maybe going to see your name and have certain brand things associated with it. So it helps you be able to control that brand. And then also what's really powerful is if someone has heard of you before in a positive way, and they'll be like, oh, this person I've heard of, they always post on social media stuff that I find to be very interesting. And then it's kind of this visibility and a possibility too. This is from Scott Talon, where you actually have a lot more influence and control of your presence on the web. Because if you don't take control of it, the web will take care of it for you. And that's not always the best. So this is all about thinking about brand view. And this is brand view, all encompassing, and also for career and professional development. So first thing you have to kind of think about is, what is my brand? What do I think my brand would be? So first we had those different spheres. One is how others see you. So this would be a good time to talk to, colleagues, friends, or family. Don't make it like a big thing, but just say like, hey, could you give me like 3 words that you think of when you think of me, if you're not sure what they think of you. The other thing you can do to see how others see you is Google. And this is where we don't have as much, if you don't harness social media or you're just kind of doing it without thinking about your brand, Google will tell people who you are. And there's something else to be said about that. Some of us have very common names. Or you may have a not so common name, but you share it with somebody else, and it's kind of hard to differentiate who you are from that person. Maybe you're even Like I've talked to some like Mike Smiths, for example, and how do you like tell one from the other when you start Googling? Because really you're likely going to be Googled. So thinking about, do I add an initial? Do I add my degrees? All of these things onto my social media to kind of differentiate myself so that people will know who I am. But I always recommend people Google themselves pretty frequently, just to kind of get a sense, or especially before you're going to go on the job market, so you kind of have an idea of what is out there about you, and see if you have a chance to control that message. So really, it's a very interconnected web of different types of social media that we can be on to influence our brand. And that's where we come into play, because we have a say in what our brand is if we're on social media. So those Google searches will pull up things that we have done. So where do you start? So the thing that I would recommend doing is creating a social media brand persona and trying to remain consistent across every social channel you use. So when someone hears about your name on this, type of social media, they expect to hear about this other thing. Now, you can use different types of social media for different things. So for me, I use Facebook. Facebook is like family, friends, grandparents, all of that stuff. And I talk about family things generally on there, or maybe share something funny. But what I don't do is I don't share anything that's really polarizing or something that would really impact my brand, because that's part of my brand, because I'm in career development. So I want everybody to feel comfortable to come to me. But I also mindfully think about when I'm sharing these family things, that I'm also saying I am a woman I happen to have children and I'm working. So I have a policy of being open about that, because I think sometimes people hide those things because they don't think it's acceptable. So I want people to know that if they ever want to come and talk to me about that, they can. So when I put that stuff on social media, before I hit share, before I click on Facebook, I think, is this tying in with my brand? Is this something that I would want the president of the university to see? Right? All of these things. And that's what I think about when I put together my brand. And your brand, it may be very different from my brand, and that is fine. So you decide what kind of content you'll share on different social media platforms and when to share on each. So for example, when I'm on LinkedIn, it's purely professional all the time. You will never see pictures of my children, and I always get their permission now before I post their pictures. And those kinds of things. Or, I don't tend to share really funny things either on LinkedIn. That is my professional persona. Twitter, that can be a little bit more loose. People really share both things on there, kind of to make you a well-rounded human being, which you are. So that actually can be an interesting place to be. So you have to be thinking about, who am I talking to? Who's my audience on here? And also knowing the limitations of different types of social media. Instagram, people aren't typically going to read your texts. Those are mostly for pictures. So if you have like really cool science slides, maybe you share those on multiple sites. There's ways to do that. Like there's Hootsuite and other things where you can share on multiple platforms. You have to pay for that. Or you just choose to share something really cool on multiple platforms. So there's tons of different places for social media. So we talked about some of the biggies: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. Even though that's like kind of a place that people go and like post, crafty ideas that they have or whatever, that's still searchable by a lot of people. And so you could have that pull up on your Google search too. So in some ways, that's social media that can impact your brand. YouTube, I've had some people do some really great videos about what they're researching. Or their work. That's another place that you can influence your brand. And then there's Tumblr and Reddit. You're asking questions that can also get pulled up. ResearchGate is a place where a lot of times like papers will be put out there. So there's lots of different options for social media. So be thinking about which ones you're in and how you're participating in this and how does it impact or influence or tell people about your brand, because this is what you're in control of. So here's some ideas of ways to create your brand or promote yourself on social media. So Twitter, if you're going to a conference, a lot of conferences have hashtags. Use that hashtag. I have networked a whole lot and gotten invited to be on committees and chair certain things just because I was a newcomer. I used the hashtag sharing some things, and that's a really great way to network with others. So share, you may like it. It's a whole way of networking where you don't even have to leave where you're sitting. You should still do that. That's a whole other topic, but it's a way to do that. So, and if you happen to be presenting, let people know. So even people who aren't at the conference will know A, you were at that conference, and B, that you were presenting. LinkedIn, one really great way to kind of get more involved is to join a group. So it'll show that you're part of this group. So that's building your brand and constructively and positively adding to the conversation. So that's really important that you kind of consider to be constructive and positive in all social media interactions. It's really tempting sometimes to have like a knockdown, drag out discussion or debate with somebody on social media, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't work as well as it does in person, and sometimes it doesn't present as well either. So trying to be your most positive self on social media is a really great way to promote your brand. If you're still on Facebook, I know that's kind of going out, but sharing articles on science or another area you're interested in, you can also do this on LinkedIn, and maybe even reaching out to people, with some of the current things that are going on in the world. Maybe you have a knowledge base that kind of can inform the discussion, and like maybe your family and friends would appreciate that. I know a lot of scientists that I worked with that were working in COVID research were really using more ways to reach out to like not just their science people. If you're giving a talk at a conference, have someone take your picture and post it. If you've had a paper published, you can put it on Facebook, LinkedIn, share it on Twitter, whatever. But these are ways to start creating your own brand, your own professional development brand on social media. So the next part of my talk is just to talk about some of the do's of social media. So one of the things that's really important is to use a personal photo. The problem is some people don't want to have a photo to keep themselves anonymous. And if you have a really good reason for that, that is fine. But the honest truth is if you have a professional photo, or any kind of photo really, you're 14 times more likely to be viewed. You don't have a photo, I think people just don't feel as connected with you. And it doesn't actually, what's been really interesting in social media, when I first started talking about this, I don't know, 10 years ago, the professional photo was what you wanted. You wanted to sit there with that blue background and have your suit on and whatever, that was it. And I'm not saying that in some fields that's not still it, but you should take a look around your field or the field that you're interested in being in and seeing what people are using for their photos. They're becoming a lot more casual, which is, makes you more approachable. So really take a look and see what the market, like what people are doing in their photos and kind of mirror that. You wouldn't want to be sitting there in like this perfect suit and everybody else is sitting there like on a beach or doing some fun science thing or whatever. So really take a look at your field and decide what makes the most sense for you. But using a photo is very powerful. The other really great section to use that is underutilized is the summary section. So like in Twitter, you'll see kind of a descriptive Twitter bio. And what's really cool about Twitter is, again, the flavor of Twitter is a little bit different because it has like this professional, personal kind of intersection. Look at some and say, oh, I like that, or, don't like that, and really take advantage of that, because chances are that somebody, especially when they first like connect with you, that's the first time and the only time they're going to look at it. So that's a really great opportunity. You can state your field of study and your interests. You can even pin a tweet to the top of your personal page that'll always stay there. Make sure you stay on top of that so it's not like, 5 years old and not relevant anymore, but you can use that for something you've written or contributed to. When you're connecting on LinkedIn, it's really important to be personal when connecting. So the phone app is wonderful and horrible at the same time because it will automatically do this, where it'll include your personal note and said, I'll add you to my professional, I would like to add you. I've talked to some people and people have different parameters of who they accept as connections on LinkedIn. I'm kind of I will accept everybody as a connection on LinkedIn because I feel like the more connections I have, the more people I'm connected with. Some people tailor theirs a lot more. That's a personal choice. But I do know some of my colleagues and other people I've talked to, they won't connect with somebody if they get this one because it doesn't seem personalized. So if you've met them at a conference, if you met them in a class, if you met them at one of these talks, that's a really great way to do it. So really be aware of the smartphone connect, as tempting as it is, unless you're sitting there with the person saying, oh, I want to connect with you. Let me do it right now so I don't forget. That's fine, but don't a couple days later try to do that. Because there are some people that won't accept those requests. Another really great idea on social media is to be a joiner. So joining groups. So groups that are part of your profession or your desired profession, if you're somebody who's considering switching careers. It really can expand your exposure. So again, if you post in there, or you can just stalk and watch and kind of get an idea of what the current, what's current in the field. And if there's somebody you're interacting with really positively on this platform, you could invite them to be part of your network where you can connect with them. On Twitter, a really great thing to do is to find hashtags of interest and follow them. And if it's possible to contribute to them or use the hashtag, totally can do that. And if people follow you on social media, decide if you want to follow them back. Does it make sense? Sometimes I have people want to follow me on social media and it's pretty obvious. The main reason they want to follow me is to sell me something. I probably won't follow them back. That I'm not even sure I'll accept their following. It's just kind of a personal thing, but you kind of have to think about that because it will affect your feed. But if it's somebody you have some connection with, or is part of a field that you're interested in, it's really best to connect with them rather than to be exclusive. Again, finding relevant hashtags, and complimenting people or continuing conversations using the @ symbol. And so that's really great on Twitter. Sometimes if I've gone to a talk and I really liked what somebody did, I'll be at whomever. I'll use Mike Smith. I don't know any Mike Smiths, but I'm just going to keep using that. At Mike Smith, this was a fantastic talk. I learned so much about X. Thank you so much. That goes a long way. And being genuine about it. I'm not saying tell somebody you like their talk if you really thought it was terrible, but don't tag them and say, I didn't like your talk. That's not great. So again, if I haven't said it enough, people have different rules for different social media platforms. You can't control their own rules. So that's okay. But just know that. And maybe think about, do you have some rules for different social media platforms? This is a really great way. Social media is a fantastic way to promote yourself. I've talked about this a couple of different ways to promote yourself. You can post articles you've published, any grants or awards, you can post about these, any studies you've helped with, you can post about that. Really awesome work that your research team is doing, you can post about that, those kinds of things. I started a graduate program in X, you could post about that. You're just letting people know, what am I currently doing? Reaching out. This kind of goes along with joining, is this contribution to pages and groups on relevant groups. If you were able to do that, really take the time to do that. I'm not saying you have to spend an hour or something on social media every day. You could, You could, but you don't have to. But be thinking about how can I contribute, posting relevant information on your own page, an article, or an interesting area, especially if you're trying to make that as part of your brand. And just be thinking about that brand every time right before you post. Think, what is this adding to my brand? Or is this continuing a topic in my brand? So it's just always, I take a moment every time before I post anything, just because I'm trying to think about what is my brand saying, because no matter how many walls and protections and all this other stuff that I have on my social media, I'm assuming everything I'm putting on there will be found. And I think that's a safe assumption, because you never know who you're connected with. It could be on, a recruitment committee, or know somebody, or whatever. So I always assume whatever I'm going to post is public consumption. If you get an invitation or somebody connects with you and it's meaningful, you really want to try to respond promptly. Within 1 to 2 business days really is best. You don't have to respond immediately. I know sometimes we kind of have this Amazon culture where we're like, ooh, must do it right now. And sometimes I, feel that way. And I'm like, ooh, why hasn't this person accepted my connection yet? But the reality is we're busy people. So for those, or if somebody wants to have a discussion with you or wants to do an informational interview with you, try to respond within 1 to 2 days if feasible. Something really powerful about social media is using it for informational interviews. This is especially relevant on LinkedIn. So an informational interview is when you can meet with somebody, and it's not to like interview for a position, but it's more to interview to try to find out about what this career is about, or what this field is about, or what this company is about. You're not actively applying at this time. That's again another talk, but it's really a great place to start to connect with people. On LinkedIn, there's alumni organizations. You can search up past institutions. You can search up University of Maryland. You can search up companies that you've worked for. And there may be a network of alumni, and you may be able to find somebody that is a good person for you to speak with. And you can say, oh, I'm also a University of Maryland alumni, or I'm currently, and I see you went to University of Maryland. I would like to speak with you if possible and have an informational interview. The other thing that's important is thinking about your brand. Is while I'm talking about this, it's kind of like Starbucks, which probably isn't the most genuine, right? Because they have a business model, as do we in some ways. It's really important to be yourself. And you don't have to be serious all the time. Sometimes having something that isn't about your research specifically or about your work specifically really can make you seem more human. And it really adds just a whole nother dimension to your brand. So I think it's really important to think about that when you're putting this together, that it doesn't have to be so, strict. But there's moments in here, and it's totally appropriate, especially even on social media like Twitter, to put things that are not just about your work. So now I have some don'ts of social media. So here's one where it says, William Shakespeare is a creative, forward thinker with excellent written communication skills. Well, that's a little dry, isn't it? And it doesn't really tell you about what William Shakespeare even did. So it's a bunch of jargon that can be, put all together, and it really just sounds flat and it sounds like everybody else. So what you want to try to avoid is like kind of a string of what they call buzzwords. LinkedIn takes once in a while, we'll look and see what the most common buzzwords are. And it's not to say you shouldn't use any of these, but if you start saying, I'm a passionate, motivated, creative ninja, I would never use ninja, but to each their own. That would be maybe just putting it on a little thick and honestly not being very genuine. So not to say you can't use any of these words, except maybe ninja and guru also, but I think it would be good to kind of be genuine when you're talking about who you are. Something else that's really important is trying not to be a jerk. So sometimes you'll see people on social media that all they do is post self-serving information. So here I have told you a bunch of information about how to promote yourself, and that is great. But if all you're doing on social media is promoting yourself and not giving kudos to others, not talking about other things that are happening in the field that you didn't actually do, it kind of starts to seem like this person is just about self-promotion and not about the community as a whole. So that really can put people off. The other thing you don't want to do, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is not criticizing others or being overly negative in groups. You don't know who you're criticizing and their weight that that person has in the field and who else they know and who else they know and who else they know. And once you've done that, it's almost impossible to take it back. So again, that's that pause before I hit the submit or send or whatever button. So kind of thinking about how to build your brand well there. The other thing, and it's really happens quite a bit on LinkedIn, not as much as it used to because I think people finally got the message, but sometimes you can see when somebody's looked at your profile on LinkedIn and I've had people come and reach back out and say, I've seen you read my profile, so I would like to connect with you. That's not great because there was probably a reason that I wasn't connecting with you. Maybe we were looking at you as a candidate for a position, whatever. So it's really best if you see somebody looking at you, don't like reach right out and say, I'd like to connect with you if they didn't connect with you. If like, a few weeks down the line in a search, you're like, maybe I want to connect with them, that's fine. But I still wouldn't ever say I've seen you view my profile. Something else to think about is not overposting. This is hard because it can be, social media really can pull you in and you may be like, I want to share this and I want to share this and I want to comment on this. But the problem is that people get tired of hearing from the same person. So really you don't want to overpost because then you start looking like, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. So if you have something that's really pertinent that's going on in your field and you have something to contribute, of course, that would be a perfect time to maybe overpost, maybe not just 1 to 2 posts a day. And I'm talking about on a single social media feed. But maybe, that's totally fine. But if it's kind of a daily thing, you're posting like what you ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then, breathing, whatever, probably too much posting and really try to make it relevant. I said this earlier, and I'm going to just reiterate this. It is a public forum. As much as we can put protections on and do all of those things, it is still a public forum. We're connected with other people. We can change our names to be whatever we want it to be, and it may not look like us, but people on there know it is us. Your kindergarten friend knows it's you, even if you changed your name. So just remembering when you're posting, before you post, whatever you're posting is public. The other thing, and this is a little bit of mental health too, is not to be on it all the time. It just can be a time suck. Also, sometimes because people are promoting themselves, it can kind of become an environment of like, oh, wow, they've done all these great things and why haven't I done good things? And it can kind of become a problem. So take time off of Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever you're on. Really don't, maybe like map out some time to be on it. And then that's when you're on it and you don't spend all your time on it. It's really important for your own sanity and just to kind of, give yourself some space. Sometimes things get ugly on social media. I've seen Twitter be a place where this really can be, where people didn't go to a talk like this and hear, you shouldn't say negative things. If somehow you've attracted someone that's trying to be negative, really try not to engage with them. It just isn't going to go well. There's ways you can block them so that they don't know you're unfollowing them, or you can just go ahead and unfollow them. It's really important to kind of keep yourself positive in this space too. I've been known to, stealthily unfollow people when they've decided to go on a tirade about something that I completely disagree with. It's not good for my, relationship with them. And so I'm just like, okay, I'm just not, I don't want to know that about you right now. So I'm just going to, for my own sanity and my own mental health, I'm just going to disconnect. And that's totally fine. Okay, I promised I was going to give a lot of time for questions, and I did. So please feel free either to unmute, raise your hand, or put something in the chat if you have any questions. And I'm going to stop recording.